Mr. Johnson here with a tutorial video on how to create a platformer game. For this tutorial, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to show you kind of just the basics of how to get your platformer game up and running. One bit of advice is I do recommend that you have your map kind of completely done before you start this tutorial video. And so what I mean by that is having all of the terrain and props added that you want to. And really the focus of this tutorial is just going to be on how to add the devices to get, like I said, a very basic platform game. All right, the first thing on your checklist is a spawn pad. So you're going to find that by clicking Add, Devices, search Spawn, S-P-A-W-N. You're going to see a few things that come up. We specifically want a spawn pad. That is going to tell the game where the player should start. So for example, if I put this right here between the rocks, then when I play or when anybody plays my game, I'm going to start in that very specific location. So I recommend pausing the video right here and go ahead and add the spawn pad exactly where you want the players to start. All right, second thing on the checklist is also pretty easy, fortunately. It's going to be under devices again. We're going to look for something called starting inventory. If you search start, it should come up. Notice the description says it gives players item when the game begins. I'm going to put this here for now. You're going to hear me say this more than once. When you see the stuff that looks like this, these devices, the players aren't going to see that when they play the game, and I'll show you in a second. So it doesn't really matter too much where you put it. We do need to click on it. It says item to grant at the top. You need to decide what do you want the player to begin the game with. In my case, and I think a common one maybe for the platformer games, is a pickaxe, particularly if you use dynamic terrain. Let's just do a legendary. So they're going to start with a really strong pickaxe. We can test it. I always recommend testing to make sure that it works. So if I hit start game, notice I start exactly where the spawn pad was, and then if you notice, sure enough, I have my pickaxe that I can start with. So I would pause the video now and then add the device that's called starting inventory. All right, third thing we want to add to our game. I'm going to go right here. There's different ways throughout, Gimkit that you can give players items. Like I said, you can have them start with the item. You can make them find it. You can make them earn it and purchase it. For this one, for item number 3 on your checklist, I think it can be fun to kind of put in an item in the game that the player has to find or work for. And that's going to be called an item spawner device. So going back to devices, I'm going to search item again, but this time I'm going to look for the one that is called item spawner. When we say spawn, it means the player just has to get to it, but as long as they get to it, the item will be there and they can pick it up. So I'm going to click here. Really quickly, a bit of advice. I maybe should have said this earlier for the starting inventory. If you want to give the player essentially like a weapon or an item that they can fight the enemies with, you want to look for anything that has parentheses after the name. So for example, maybe I want to give them a slingshot. So I have that there. And so essentially now in my game, they're going to start with a pickaxe. And then if they want to, they can break this dynamic terrain and then they can get the slingshot. I would recommend pausing the video now and then adding an item spawner device and choose what item you want to give the player. Like I said, maybe you can treat it like a secret or hide it somewhere in your map, but maybe just something that the player has to work for to find it as they play your platformer. All right, for item number 4 on our checklist, it is a sentry. A sentry is basically like another word for like an enemy. You could even treat it like a boss if you want to. So we're going to go to add, and then under devices, you have to search sentry. Bit of advice, when you put them on your map, you have to be careful not to put them down here. I would show you, but I don't want the video to take too long. But basically, if you put them in the terrain, a lot of times they get stuck and they don't do anything. So when you go to put your enemy, make sure the green box is above the terrain. It's okay if they're floating a little bit. I think they'll usually kind of fall into place. But that's not it. What's really cool is there's a lot of things you can change about the sentry. You can change the item they have. You can change their health. So 100 is the default. If you want to make them really tough to knock out, you can make it 300. If you want them to be really easy, you can make it 30. It's up to you. Here's my favorite part though is the appearance. Gimkit Creative is really nice, and they give you access to all of these skins. So you can kind of scroll through, find one that you like. I'll do the mummy. Oh, there's even more stuff. If you hit difficulty, you can set their aim accuracy, so how accurate they are with their item, how quickly they fire, do they respawn after they're knocked out, and if so, how long does it take them to respawn? And something really cool is that if you click on the knockout tab, you can actually have them drop an item. So I'm going to do that with this one. I'm going to have them drop a gold key. So if the player knocks them out, they can use that gold key, and we're gonna code something later in our game so that that gold key is helpful. So there's a lot of stuff you can change about the sentry, and of course you can add more than one if you want to. So what I would encourage you to do now, like I have been, is pause the video and decide where do you want to add a sentry, maybe even more than one in your map, and then don't forget to click on them and change their difficulty, their health, what they look like, and have them drop maybe some type of special item for the player. All right, item number 5 on your checklist is checkpoints. So if you're playing a platformer, and I think most of you have played an example one, it can be really frustrating if you're going up and then you fall all the way back down to the bottom, and then you have to start over. Checkpoints are handy because it gives you a place to respawn if your player gets knocked out. They're really easy to add too. So I'm going to search check, and then I'm going to do the one called checkpoint. It's going to be a little star and a bubble that the player can touch as they play. I'm going to encourage you to change one setting though about the checkpoint. So if I click on it, I would recommend changing the activation limit to only once. It's kind of a long story, and like I said, I don't want the video to be too long, but it will actually help your players. It makes it easier for them. That way they don't accidentally reactivate an early checkpoint if they already have one farther in the game. So you need to add checkpoints throughout the game. It's kind of up to you. It's your platformer game, so you can decide how difficult you want to be. The more checkpoints, the easier it is for the player. Hopefully you've kind of added levels to your map and you've actually got them named. So maybe it makes sense to add a checkpoint at every level, but it's up to you. All right, item number 6 is a barrier. So this can be another kind of cool feature to add to your platformer just to make the player do a little bit more work. To find the barrier, it's going to be under devices. It is called barrier. You can place it where you want. If you click on it, you can hit change size. So maybe I want to make this tall enough so that a player can't jump over it, which I think we're good right now. You can change the color, whatever makes sense for you. You can change the shape. We do want to have it activated at the start of the game. You can kind of change the transparency a little bit. If I turn it to like 0.4, you'll notice it looks a little bit more see-through. So that's going to be up to you. I want mine to be solid, so I'm going to put a 1. While you have the barrier, we want to go to active scope. I would recommend, it depends kind of if you have multiple people playing your game. If you are going to have multiple people playing your game at once and you want them to work individually, and so they each have to find their own way to unlock the barrier, where it says active scope, you want to change that to player. So then it's up to each player to unlock the barrier. If you plan on having multiple people play it, but you want them to work as a team, then you can leave it global. And then what happens is when one player unlocks it, it unlocks for everybody playing the game. In my case, though, I want each player to have to figure out how to get past it. And then the last thing that we're going to change while we're here is we need to add something called a channel. So down here, there's something called deactivate. So deactivate means the barrier will disappear and the players can pass. Right now, we're going to call this open barrier so we remember kind of what that channel is and what it does. So I would encourage you once again to pause the video right here. Go back and watch this part if you need to, because there's kind of a lot that we did with this barrier and a lot of settings we changed. But decide on your map, where does it make sense to add that barrier that the player is going to have to get past. And I'll show you in the next step how to unlock the barrier. All right, for item number 7, we need to provide a way for the player to unlock the barrier so they can continue with the game. In order to do that, honestly, there's actually a couple ways you can do it. I'm going to show you what I think is the easiest way. We're going to use a device called a vending machine. Just like you would think, like a real vending machine, it's something that can sell an item to a player, but we're actually not going to use it that way. So let's put it down first. Unfortunately, oh, well, actually, I was going to say, yeah, you can't make the vending machine smaller. You can't make it bigger. I would be careful, though, because on this platformer, if you make it too big, the players can't jump over it. So I'm going to leave it the size that it's at. Except we're not going to use the vending machine maybe the way that you would think. The first setting here says give an item, right? So you would think that's what you want if the player's going to buy something. But instead, we want them that when they turn in something to the vending machine, it's going to transmit on a channel. And so whenever they pay the vending machine, I'm going to scroll down. And it says when item purchase, transmit. And if you click here, notice I have that channel I created earlier. It's called Open Barrier. So I'm going to click on that. And basically what's happening now is these two devices are communicating with each other. The vending machine and the barrier. So they know that when the player buys the vending machine, it unlocks the barrier and then they can continue with the game. However, there's something really important that we did not do. We need to tell the vending machine what's the required item that the player needs to pay. If you remember, I said it earlier to where the boss will drop, or my sentry will drop a gold key. So I'm going to have the vending machine require a gold key. And so now what happens is if the player actually defeats the enemy and they don't just run past it and they pick up the gold key, they can now go to the vending machine. When they're playing the game, they're going to see a little prompt that says, I forget exactly what it says, but there'll be a button. And then they can turn in the gold key and it will unlock the barrier. Except now that I'm saying all this, I just realized they can jump on top of the vending machine and they can double jump up the barrier. So I do need to change the size of the barrier real quick so that they're actually forced to unlock it. And there's item number 7 on your checklist. All right, item number 8 is a teleporter. I think that's another way to make your map nice and fun. I'm going to really quickly turn gravity off so I can get past my own barrier. Of course, it's a pain. I need to make it a little bit smaller. All right, let me show you how teleporters work. Obviously, we need 2 of them because they're going to communicate with each other and they'll send the player from one to the other. You can find them in the devices if you search teleporter. So I'm going to put one right here by my little escape hatch, because what I want to happen is I want it to look like the player jumps into the hatch and then they teleport. And then I'm going to copy this one, my teleporter, and I'm going to put the second one wherever I want them to teleport to. And I want them to teleport up here to level 4. All right. The game right now, if you touch the teleporter, if you're actually playing, nothing would happen because we need to set them up. So I'm going to click on the first teleporter. One important thing I want to point out is you can make it visible in the game so the players see it, which right now it always defaults to yes. I'm actually going to change it to no. Because like I said, when players play my game, I don't want them to see the teleporter. I just want it to look like they jump into the hatch and disappear. So I'm going to make mine invisible, but that's up to you. What you do need to change is this right here. When you see the word group, I want you to think of that as just the name of the teleporter. So I'm going to call this teleporter level 3 because that's where it's at. And then when you see target group, I'm going to change that to level 4 because that's the target or where I want them to send the player. However, that's not it because right now there is no level 4 teleporter because I haven't set it up yet. So I need to go up here. I'm going to click on this one. And remember, you have to give it a name, otherwise it doesn't work. So under group, I'm going to make sure I click on level 4. And so now when the player touches this teleporter down here, which is called level 3 teleporter, it will send them up here to this one for level 4. If you want, you can maybe send this one back to level 3 if they touch it. In my game, they might get a little confused. And so I'm actually going to leave this one blank because I don't want them to be able to touch this teleporter and send them back. I want them to continue with the game once they've made it here. So that's going to be up to you. But if you want this one to send it to another one, then you can give it another name. You can add more than 2 teleporters. You could have 3, 4, 5 that all communicate with each other. But what's important is that you give them a name, which is the group, and you give them a target, if you want, of where to send the player to. So go ahead, add your teleporters. Don't forget to decide whether you want to... Oh, see, I almost forgot. I want this one to be invisible too. So decide whether you want it to be visible or invisible. Give it a name for the group, and then for every teleporter, decide whether you want it to have a target to send the player to. All right, we are almost done. Item 9 on the checklist is a laser. If you've noticed, earlier in the tutorial, we added some checkpoints. I need to turn my speed up. Let me do that real quick. We added some checkpoints. Here's the problem, is that when we're playing the game, let's say somebody's play testing it right now, and they touch this checkpoint, but then they fall right here. Nothing's going to happen because they weren't knocked out, so they're not going to respawn at the checkpoint. So they're still going to have to walk all the way over here at their normal speed and then start all over. So the only way a checkpoint works and the player respawns at it is if they lose all of their health and they get knocked out. So we need to tell the game or force the game to kind of respawn the player if they fall. There's a few ways to do this. In my opinion, the easy way I'm going to show you is to use a laser. So what I would do is I click on devices. If I search for laser, it gives me one. If I click on it, I can hit change size. If I grab the white part, I can make it a lot bigger. If you grab the green, you can rotate it. If you want one that's going up and down, you can add that to make more difficulty. But for now, I just want this here to force the player to respawn if they fall. So I'm going to make that as big as I can get, which I think that's... Oh no, you can make it really large. So make a really large one. You can change the color of it. You can make it look like a plant style. It's going to be up to you. What's really important is the damage dealt. If you don't mess with the health settings in your game, every player starts with 200 health. Technically, it's 100 health and 100 armor. So if you want them to be instantly knocked out and respawn at the checkpoint, then you need to set the damage to 200 or higher. There's a lot more you can do with lasers. I'm going to keep it simple for now, and I'm just going to show you that. Don't forget, you can always just use the copy shortcut. So all I did was press C on my keyboard. And I'm going to add more. That way, if the player falls at any point in the game, they will fall directly into the laser and it will automatically respawn them at the checkpoint. All right, last thing that we need to add is a way to end the game when the player makes it to the end. So let's say I want the end of the game to be right here. What we're going to do is we're actually going to add one last checkpoint. So I'm going to search for checkpoint. Let's add it here. I would encourage you maybe add like some text or something that says like end of game or congrats or something like that, so the player knows that this is the last checkpoint and the game will end if they touch it. However, right now this is just like any other checkpoint, so there's one more thing we need to do. We're actually going to add a channel to this checkpoint. What's really important is that you get the right channel, because right now if I click on my last checkpoint and I hit channels, there's two of them. We need to do the one on the bottom, the one that says when checkpoint activated, transmit on, and we're going to make a new channel called in-game. So now we have our last checkpoint. We have a channel called in-game. However, if the player touches this, nothing's still going to happen because that in-game channel isn't communicating with anything right now. So our last device that we need to add is actually appropriately called the in-game device. And notice the description says in the game with this device. So we're going to add it here. The player won't see it. I'm going to click on it. Notice there's only one channel. It's really simple. I'm going to click here, and then we're going to do this in-game, the same channel we just created with our last checkpoint. So now the game knows, hey, when the player touches this last star, the one that has the channel that says in-game, it'll communicate with this device and the game will end and the player wins. So for this last item on your checklist or your rubric, you need to add one more final checkpoint at the end. Like I said, I would encourage you to add some text just to give the player a heads up that this is the end. And then don't forget to add the channel. And then add the in-game device and give it that same channel name. And then your platformer is done. Like I said, I try to keep it simple. There's obviously a lot more cool things that you can do in Gimkit Creative. If you finish early, you are more than welcome to explore some more of these devices. I'm more than happy to help you too. But these are the 10 basic things that you need to include in your game. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you need help.